So as we take our next bit of the journey in the lifetime of the Beatles, we remember on the 10th of May 1960, with Johnny Hutch and then Tommy Moore playing drums, the Beatles, as the Silver Beatles, became a rock and roll group for the first time. Then I told you the story of how they went to Latham Hall and they had to borrow Cliff Roberts as drummer as they did the audition for Brian Kelly. Then they were billed to appear the next week as the Silver Beats, but never turned up because they went off on this tour of Scotland backing Johnny Gentle. So that sort of went well. They started out very average, but Johnny Gentle said by the end of those few gigs they played up there, the Beatles were playing really, really well. Now, they did actually call themselves the Beatles, and they spelt it Beatals. And they signed their names. Well, Tommy Moore just went as Thomas Moore, John as John Lennon, but Paul became Paul Ramon, which is where the Ramones took their name from. George became Carl Harrison, after Carl Perkins, of course. And Stuart wanted to pick an artist, so he was Stuart de Stael. So they thought having stage names would make them sound great. Now, of course, musically, they were still learning. But there was one problem for Tommy Moore. On the way into Fraserburgh, there was a car accident. They hit another car. Of course, they were in this van, and they've got all these equipment boxes and cases. They came flying forward and smashed Tommy Moore right in the face. Now, he busted up his nose. He lost teeth. He split his lip. He was in a terrible way. And of course, they had to take him to hospital. But that night, they were due to play in Fraserburgh. What could they do? They needed their drummer. Now, as you know, John was not the most empathetic of men. He went to the hospital, dragged Tommy out of bed, and stuck him behind the drums. Now, think of this. If you've got a banging headache and concussion, what's the last instrument you want to be playing? Yeah, the drums. So there's poor Tommy, half dazed, concussed, thumping away at the drums, lip out here with stitches. And apparently, John thought it'd be fun to try and make him laugh to burst the stitches. Hey, what a guy. Now, here's the big shocker. When they come back to Liverpool, Tommy Moore decides to quit. I wonder why. Now, part of the reason was that, yeah, he didn't get on with John. They'd had a terrible experience on the tour. But also, his wife had said to him, stop this messing around in the group. Here's your choice. It's me or it's the group. And if it's me, you go back to your job. And so he went back to his job at the Garston Bottle Works, driving a forklift truck. But of course, the Silver Beatles have now got gigs. Alan Williams has been lining these up. So the lads turn up and they're looking for Tommy. And his wife says, well, he's not here. He's doing his job. So they go up to the Garston Bottle Works and they ask for Tommy. Tommy comes to the gate with the foreman. And they say, come on, Tommy, we need you. Now, John stayed back in the car, very wisely. And he begged him to play. But he refused to. Now, my friend Ant Hogan, it was his dad, was Tommy's boss. And he turned to Tommy and he said, look, do you want to play? And Tommy said, no, not with them. I said, fair enough, off you go, lads. What could they do? So they drive over to their gig, which is at Grosvenor Ballroom. That's in Wallasey on the other side of the River Mersey to Liverpool. But of course, they've got the drums, but they've got no drummer. This is where two very interesting incidents take place. Now, first one is a young lad, 15 years of age. He becomes famous later on and the leader of the local gang. The reason they come into the story is because John thought he was smart. And he says to the crowd, well, as you can see, we haven't got a drummer. I don't suppose there's a drummer in the audience. He thought that was a joke. Young 15-year-old Jackie Lomax says, I'll give it a go. Jackie gets up and he said, I played for one song. I was that bad. I walked off again. Now, if you think you know the name of Jackie Lomax, you probably do. Because he became the lead singer, obviously not the drummer, of The Undertakers. And he was signed to Apple Records as a solo artist. And of course, George Harrison produced him, Sour Milk Sea, look it up. So Jackie Lomax played for one song, and off he went. But then the leader of the local gang, known as Ronnie The Ted in Beatles legend, but actually his nickname was Ronnie The Kosh. Now, the Kosh is like a weapon you go around and hit people with. He was this big guy, leader of the local Teddy Boy gang. He said, I'll play. Now, John and the lads might have thought they were a bit tough. They weren't. Particularly when you got this big, over 6 foot Teddy Boy saying, I'll play. So Ronnie sits down behind the drums and he bashes away all night. I mean, he's pretty average. But none of the Beatles could tell him that. And at the end of the night, he says, I'll be your drummer. With their bottles gone. And he goes to the smallest of the group, which is Alan Williams, their manager, who looks at Big Ronnie and says, tell you what, if we haven't got a drummer by next time, I'll give you a call. Now, Ronnie the Ted has gone down in legend. I spent years and years searching for him. And finally, we found out who he is, and his name was Ronnie Houlihan. And so his nickname was Ronnie the Kosh. Now, he died many years ago, but he had a fearsome reputation. But he was, for one night only, drummer with the Silver Beatles. So, Ronnie, thank you so much for that story. So, they had Johnny Hutch for a song or two, and Tommy Moore. Tommy Moore went on the tour. He quits when they come back. Jackie Lomax sits in. He quits after one song. Ronnie the Ted, Ronnie the Kosh, he sits in for the rest of that gig. What are they going to do? Well, Alan Williams comes up with a solution, and he says, look, while we find another drummer, I've got you a little gig for a week. And he said, great, where is it? Alan and his business partner, Lord Woodbine, were sort of co-managing the Beatles at this time. They had an illegal strip club, the Cabaret Artiste Club on Upper Parliament Street in Liverpool. The building's gone now, unfortunately. And he said, yeah, lads, you can play there for a week. And Paul says, he and John and George and Stuart looked at each other and said, we're not playing in a little dingy strip club. And Alan said, well, you've got no other bookings, you need the money. You're going to do it. And later on, Paul said, we did it just for the indignity of it. The reason why they were required was that Alan and Woody had enlisted the help of a stripper from Manchester, whose name was Janice, and she had some class about her because she would only take her clothes off to live music, not to records. So they have a live band, but they've got no drummer. So who steps in? Paul McCartney. So they're on this little stage, John, Paul, George and Stuart. Paul's playing the drums, and this is like probably a 6 foot square stage, while Janice strips off in front of them. Now, she'd come with all kinds of sheet music, said, can you play these? And they said, none of us read music. You have to put up with what we've got, like the Harry Lime theme and stuff. Little George, of course, he's very young, very impressionable, and highly embarrassed with this stripper taking off her clothes in front of him. Paul says the fun he had was, because of course he would sing some of the songs, so he had to get a microphone, attach it to a broomstick, like they would do in the Jacaranda Club, stick that between his legs while he's trying to play the drums and sing. So they did that for a week, and it was, well, it was a nightmare. And they said, that's it, we're never playing a strip club ever again. And to be fair to them, they didn't. Well, not at least for 2 months when they went to Hamburg.